Actiones nostres quaesimus, Domine, et aspirando praeveni et adjuvando prosequere, ut cuncta nostra. Operatio a te sempre incipiat, per te coipta fidiata, per Iesum Christum, Dominum nostrum. Amen. Dirigere et sanctificare, et reggere dignare, Domine Deus, quaesimus corda et corpora nostra in lege tua, et in operibus mandatorum tuum, ut hic in aeternum te auxiliante sani et salvi esse mediamo, per Iesum Christum, Dominum nostrum. Amen. Amen. Pater noster, qui es in coelis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tuas, sicut in coelum et terra. Panem nostrem quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos debitimus debitoribus nostris. Et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo, tuum enes regnum et potentia et gloria in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
You can all be seated. Thank you. My name is Mayo Moran, and I'm the Provost, and it is my great pleasure to welcome all of the graduates, their families, their friends, their supporters, and of course the honorees tonight to our Divinity Convocation. This year, we have 19 master's and doctoral students who will receive their divinity degrees, which are awarded, as you may know, conjointly with the University of Toronto. Our graduate students, and I know this from personal experience because I've had the great pleasure of working with many of them, are a wonderful group. They have done a lot while they've been here. They're a great credit to Trinity and to the University of Toronto and Toronto School of Theology. And so on behalf of Trinity College, I want to warmly congratulate all of the graduates on your great accomplishment. It's no small measure to have finished a graduate degree, and to wish you all the very best in the journey ahead. It's been a great pleasure for all of us to have worked with you and to get to know you a bit. We hope you will stay in touch, and we will miss you. I'm also delighted to acknowledge and to welcome tonight Trinity's 3 honorary degree recipients. First of all, the degree of the Doctor of Sacred Letters, honoris causa, will be conferred on Dr. Nona MacDonald Heaslip in recognition of her outstanding dedication to the arts and to education, her long history of engagement and philanthropy, and in the establishment of the William and Nona Heaslip Scholarships and the William and Nona Heaslip Trinity St. Anthony Scholarships, which demonstrate her passionate support of students' engagement in their university experience. We will also confer an honorary degree of Divinity honoris causa upon the Venerable A. Paul Feely in recognition of his progressive leadership within the National Church and his role in furthering the vision and the mandate of the Anglican Church of Canada, particularly through his involvement in communications within the global church. And the Doctor of Divinity honoris causa will also tonight be conferred on the Reverend John St. Helier Gibault in recognition of his outstanding work with the ecumenical movement of churches and the Anglican Communion of Churches, as well as the Anglican Orthodox Dialogue and the World Council of Churches. His groundbreaking work has begun the potential for healing ancient divisions within the Church, and I'm thrilled to say that he will deliver the convocation address to the graduating class of 2017 this evening. Presiding at tonight's ceremony, we are very fortunate to have Professor Elizabeth Smythe, Vice Dean of the School of the Graduate Studies, representing the University of Toronto Chancellor's Office, and of course, our very own dedicated and wonderful Trinity Chancellor, the Honourable William C. Graham. I should mention that this evening, you might notice in the program there are a few little different mentions. We will miss the Right Reverend Philip Poole, who was to have presented Paul Feely, as well as Archbishop Hiltz, who was also to have presented Paul Feely. I'm assured it's nothing about Paul Feely. And I am fortified in that confidence by the fact that we have Archbishop Colin Johnston, who will, in fact, tonight step into that role. Thank you very much, Archbishop. Lastly, I would just like to mention something that is probably on all of our minds, which is the fact that the graduation of this Divinity class tonight marks Dean David Neelan's last Divinity Convocation as Dean. Not his last one, just the last one as Dean. And I know that the class honorees and guests will all want to join me in extending our incredibly profound thanks to David for his stewardship during his remarkable 15 years as Dean. The faculty from which you are graduating would not be the same without that. I think the applause is fitting tonight because I know that for David, in all of his years and all of his work, nothing has meant more to him than the students. And so very glad to celebrate with him and of course with all of you this wonderful celebration tonight. Congratulations from all of you. Well done and enjoy. Thank you.
Councillor Graham, Vice Dean Smythe, I have the honour to present those who have won prizes and will receive diplomas, licentiates, and certificates. In the first year, the Dean Fielding Scholarship for the highest standing goes to Brian George Armstrong. The Canon G.B. Morley Memorial Prize in New Testament Greek to Clayton Stephen Crouch. The Doolittle Prize, there are two O's in Doolittle. The Doolittle Prize in Reading for the most improved preaching skills, Michael Corrin. The Rupert Fenwick Williams Prize in New Testament to Bowden Halajo. The Margaret L. Muckle Prize in Christian Education to Hilary Margaret Hamilton Ketchy. And the Sidney Charles Prize in Dogmatics to James William Noel Leach. In the second year, the Alexander Burnside Chaffee Prize for Best Preaching Skills and the Spencer Prize in Mission Study to Brittany Lynn Cartwright. The Archbishop Kingston Memorial Scholarship for Highest Standing goes to Susan Ann McCulloch. The Canon Charles Frederick Pashler Prize in Moral Theology to Bryn Heather Snow. The 4th Bishop of Toronto's Prize for General Proficiency, the Canon P.M. Lamb Prize in New Testament Greek, the MacDonald Prize for General Knowledge of the English Bible, the Margaret L. Muckle Prize in Philosophy of Religion, the Shannon John Whalen. The Gordon Kent Stephen Memorial Prize for Highest Standing in Third Year, the Margaret Muckle Prize in Church History, the Divinity Associates Prize for College Involvement to Gavin Ian James Hamilton Ketchy. The MacDonald Prize for General Knowledge of the English Bible, Peter Sanders Newell. The Nicholson Prize in Liturgics, Joshua Gerhard Petkow. The Kent Testimonial Prize for Best Master of Theological Studies Thesis, Gail Mary Scott. The Canadian Bible Society Prize for Excellence in Scripture Reading to Michael Strang. The Dorothy Shooter Prize in Liturgics to Wei-Lang Wu. The John Garchor Integrity Award to Peter James Sanfilippo and Robert William Walker. And the Governor General's Silver Medal for the highest standing overall, Gavin Ian James Hamilton Ketchy. The Faculty of Divinity presents diplomas, licentiates, and certificates. The Diploma in Ministry to Wei-Lang Wu. The Diploma in Theology to Jonathan Robert Cowens. The Licentiate in Theology to Deborah Ann Chapman. And to Paul Joseph Jacobs Servos. The Certificate in Orthodox and Eastern Christian Studies to Chris Douglas Floroff. To Elena Yurevna Lobsanova. And to Susan Ann McCulloch.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Elizabeth Smythe, Vice Dean, School of Graduate Studies, who will bring greetings from the University of Toronto.
Chancellor Graham, Provost Moran, honorary graduands, Faculty of Divinity graduating class, faculty members, and assembled guests. On behalf of Chancellor Wilson, I am honored to attend Trinity's Convocation ceremony this evening, and to do so as the representative of the University of Toronto. Above all, I am pleased to have the opportunity to extend congratulations and best wishes to the members of the Divinity graduating class who will be awarded degrees conjointly by Trinity College and the University of Toronto. This gives a very special quality to your degrees, an added reason for pride in your accomplishments. It is a measure of the uniqueness of the University of Toronto that I, as a representative of U of T, can play a role in the convocation of this federated universities
and in particular to participate in the graduation ceremony of its students. As you know, the university is one of society's most crucial institutions, originating in its modern form during the Middle Ages. Drawing on this lineage, the University of Toronto is proud to continue hosting a robust dialogue between theology and its faculties of arts and science, medicine, and law. In this, we recognize the continuing importance of the role of theology in higher education. For this reason, I am honored to help celebrate the work of Trinity College in advancing the esteemed academic discipline in the context of the modern world. Your contribution is valuable, not only to people of faith, but also to the University of Toronto, to the wider academic community, and to society as a whole. To everyone graduating and being honored this evening, on behalf of the University of Toronto, I say again, congratulations on reaching this day and on the years of hard work and perseverance it represents. I wish you success and happiness in the next chapter of your lives. Thank you.
Ready, Chancellor? Praenrobilis cancelare totaque universitas, presento vobis hosce hominus cosciotam moribus, quam doctrina esse idoneus, qui adventantur in gradus varius.
Ego, doctorate in mea et universitatis Torontensis, admitto vos in gradus varios in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Professor Wiebe.
Chancellor Graham, Vice Dean Smythe. The Master of Divinity program is a 30-credit conjoint degree program for ministry, incorporating both academic and pastoral coursework. Students with a high average in their final 20 credits may submit a thesis and qualify for a degree with honors. Gavin Ian James Hamilton Ketchy. John Paul Gabriel Marquides. Michael Samuel Phillips in absentia. The Master of Theological Studies program is a 20-credit conjoint basic degree offering a general introduction to theological scholarship. Jennifer Jane Godkin. Gordon Melvin Loning. Susan Ann McCullough. Gail Mary Scott.
The Master of Theology is a 2-year conjoint advanced degree requiring 6 advanced degree courses and a thesis, or 8 courses. Daniel Francis Graves. Mark Hubert Lack. Andrew Edward Nussey. The Doctor of Theology is a conjoint senior research doctorate requiring 12 courses in comprehensives, facility in scholarly languages, and a major thesis. John Yan Yi Chan. Jonathan Sandor Loft. The Doctor of Ministry is a professional doctoral degree for those primarily seeking to integrate advanced theological study with the practice of ministry. Students must have a first degree in theology and will have spent at least 5 years in professional ministry. It is taught in a collaborative and ecumenical context and requires a thesis. Stephen Douglas Muir.
I think a round of applause is in order for our graduates. I would now like to invite Mr. William Corcoran to present Nona MacDonald Heaslip for the degree of Doctor of Sacred Letters.
Professor Graham, Provost Moran, Vice Dean Smythe, honorary graduates, graduating class, and assembled guests. The late Dr. John Evans, president of the University of Toronto, appointed Nona MacDonald Heaslip as his first public relations executive, the start of a notable career which brought town and gown together by opening doors to the public and the media. With only one assistant, Nona had to manufacture special methods to communicate the happenings at this 80,000 population institution. First, she compiled an indexed directory of academic talent which editors and news reporters could access on their own. On campus, the Nona MacDonald Visitors Center remains an active gathering place for providing information about this complex institution. Also, campus walking tours, led by selected student guides in summer, had been ongoing since Nona's first year. Hart House's theater's entrance is now enlivened by the Walkway of Theater History, a project opened in 2008 by the renowned Canadian actor Christopher Plummer. After 5 workshops gave interview training and assistance with publicizing interdepartmental events, Nona received awards from the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. However, her most important commitments to education are the William and Nona Heaslip Scholarships, which began right here at Trinity. Bill Heaslip shared Nona's university activities, which heightened his desire to help students who couldn't afford a university education. Bill missed out on college because he had to support his parents. He decided to design a 3-year scholarship for 2 students a year, 6 in total, to complete their 4-year undergraduate education. The university originally agreed to contribute 1/3 of the $15,000 individual scholarship cost. This is where I came in. I introduced Bill to the then Provost, Margaret McMillan, who with the senior staff of Trinity approved the unique generous scholarship opportunity for students who would be selected by the professors during their first year. Following Trinity's model, this is after Margaret got it going, really, a total of 10 universities now offer these scholarships. And last year, 60 students received a scholarship. So it has grown immensely. And tonight, her hooder was the very first scholarship winner. And we're very proud of her. Since Bill's death in 2006, Nona has given 6 2-year ongoing graduate Trinity St. Anthony's College scholarships to international studies at Oxford, where Margaret McMillan is the warden. And Nona claims these graduates have become overseas ambassadors for Trinity and Canada. Chancellor, on behalf of the Corporation of Trinity College, I ask you to confer the degree of Doctor of Sacred Letters, honoris causa, upon Nona MacDonald Heaslip.
Benefactor omnibus defensorque atrium in defensa voluntaria, magistra Nona MacDonald Heaslip, bacularia Sancti Michaelis Torontonensis, cursus honorum incipit in radiophonoque nuntiis apud CBC, deende time civitastis novi eboraki, riverta patriae, Procurator Consiliorum Publicorum prima Universitati Torontonensi perita hospitibus. Dux et depenso multis aedibus artiumque Athenaeorum Canadensium nec non shoque Stratford Histrionum et Museum Cori Canadensis cum marito prae lagitione magnanima instituit Willem et nona Heslip honorarium quae apparat studentibus stipendia pro numeribus inopia quae commendatione et amplius refinxit apud Collegia Canadensis novena. Fundavit in 2007 Willem et nona Heslip Trinitatis Sanctus Antonius honorarium scholasticis nostris pro studiis legationem globalis apud Oxonensis et destinataria doctoratum honoris causa apud Collegia Principis Eduardi Insulae 2008 Torontonensis 2009. Hanc ego schio feminam tam moribus quam doctrina esse idiona qui admitator ad numerum sociorum prae honorabilim collegi huius honoris causa.
Ego, doctorate mihi demissa, ad mentor te, in graduum doctoris in sacris lectus, in nomine Patris, Filii, Sanctus.
I'd like to now ask the Most Reverend Colin Johnson to please present Alan Paul Feely for the degree of Doctor of Divinity.
Chancellor Graham, Provost Moran, Vice Dean Smythe, honorary graduands, graduating class, and assembled guests. For the second night in a row, I am Philip Poole. I have to admit that when I was at college, I always wanted to be Philip Poole. 6 inches taller, a bigger voice, although I must say I prefer to have hair on my head than on my chin. This is being read in Philip's words. He gave me instruction how to read it this afternoon. Mr. Chancellor, why in the world are we granting an honorary Doctor of Divinity to the Venerable Alan Paul Feely? Paul was born into a faith that may have caused the founders of this college a challenge. He was, in the language of the day, a papist. Educated at St. Michael's Choir School and trained in the choral tradition of that legendary institution, Paul was a bit of a child prodigy. By the age of 14, he was employed by churches in the Toronto area as a church organist, leading the musical worship of a number of Roman Catholic and Anglican parishes over time. As it was for many in that era, the exposure to the liturgical and choral music life of the church had a profound effect on Paul in shaping his life. Paul became an Anglican in his later teens. He saw the light and turned away from it. Paul chose to respond to God's call to ordained ministry, having been shaped by his divinity studies here at Trinity. and was ordered deacon in 1978 and priest in 1979. Archdeacon Feely has had a major influence on the Anglican Church, locally, nationally, and internationally. As one of his nominators reflected, Paul, quote, has earned distinction in a number of areas. He is certainly no unidimensional priest, unquote. Paul has served a total of 7 parishes in the Diocese of Toronto, known in each one of them as an effective pastor, communicator, and administrator. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, while our church was struggling with how to effectively make use of the mass media, radio and television, Paul took a lead. He was a founder of and participant on CFRB's The God Show, and contributed creatively to Anglicans in the 80s for cable television. Those of us of an age will remember the damage, and I use the term advisedly, to the faith caused by so many television evangelists at that time. And Paul presented the Christian faith in an intelligent, creative, and effective way, filled not with easy answers, but with engaged thinking. When few were, Paul was a supporter and encourager of the founding of Vision TV. Later, he would serve on the board of trustees of the Anglican, the award-winning newspaper of the Diocese of Toronto. Phil would have done, yay! Later, he would chair the Communications Committee, which directed diocesan communications in the mid-1990s, and most recently served as the interim manager of the Anglican Journal, our award-winning national paper. He has written countless pieces for religious and secular publications. It is noteworthy that his MDiv thesis here at Trinity was entitled Theology of Film and How Christian Themes Are Present and Discussed in Contemporary Cinema. Clearly, a forerunner to his lifelong interest in communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ in and through contemporary media. Just 2 other comments about Paul's communication skills. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, when our church was absorbed in the terribly dividing debates on human sexuality, Paul Feely and Chris Ambidge teamed together to present the pros and cons of the issue as seen through the lenses of scripture, science, and the tradition of the church, in a way that was informative, engaging, charitable, instructive, and thoughtful. They freely gave their time to parishes in this diocese and indeed throughout the church in Canada and at least once in England. Archbishop Johnson, that would be me in my other hat, has commented, quote, that we were able to hold a breadth of opinion in the Diocese of Toronto and remain in mutual respect and cooperative ministry is in no small part due to the effectiveness of their example. In 2008, when tensions in the Anglican Communion were near their zenith, it was Paul Feely who was seconded to the Lambeth Conference staff to help interface with the world and its religious and secular media at that historic conference. Subsequently, Paul led the communications team of the Anglican Consultative Council in Zambia and before that in Jamaica, and assisted with communications for the primates meetings. Paul is noted for his diplomacy, his ability to help polarized sides listen to one another, and his outstanding skill at helping bring reconciliation of divergent positions. He is, as an aside, one of the most recognized Canadians in the Anglican Communion. In 2004, Paul was asked to become the Principal Secretary for the Primate of Canada, a role he has served for 2 primates with distinction. It is fair to say that there is no major decision in the life of our church that Paul does not quietly and effectively help shape from behind the scenes. If this were the Academy Awards, Paul would be a shoo-in for the Best Supporting Actor. he bears himself with the rare gift of Christian humility. Finally, Mr. Chancellor, Paul is a man of prayer. Those who know him know that to be so. It is given public expression in his music, his liturgical gifts, in workshops that he leads, and in his position as National Director of the Anglican Fellowship of Prayer. I must say personally, and I'm speaking not as Phil Poole, but as Colin Johnson, he is our own family chaplain. Paul is a man who moves just as easily amongst royalty and the senior prelates of our worldwide communion as he does among the least, the lost, the lonely, the loony, and let us say the loquacious. Paul understands each person to be created in the image of God, and he respects the dignity and value of every human being. He knows, respects, and loves the diversity of the Anglican Church and gives concrete expression to that in the parish he currently leads, in his spare time, in West Toronto, where a mostly Caribbean Anglican congregation has welcomed an Anglican group from West Africa in a way that honors, respects, and celebrates diversity. Imagine that. A guy with one of the most senior positions in the Anglican Church of Canada, a very demanding job, a wife and a family, offering himself in his spare time to a small parish community in an economically challenged part of our great city. So why in the world are we granting an honorary doctorate to Paul Feely? Well, because he has been an influence for good in the life of the Anglican Church, in Toronto, in Ontario, in Canada, and in the world. As a musician, communicator, a pastor, a reconciler, administrator, visionary, and man of God. Mr. Chancellor, I am honored to present to you Archdeacon Alan Paul Feely, a proud graduate of Trinity College, an internationally distinguished Anglican, and a disciple of Jesus Christ, for the degree of Doctor of Divinity, honoris causa.
Quae honorabilis cancellariae tota quae universitatis. Praesento vobis Alanum Paulum Feheli. Schola Cantorum San Michaelis matriculatis 1971 diem bacularius universitatis Torontonensis studiis musicae 1975 exultatis licentiae magistri divinitatis apud collegium Trinitatis nostri tractatu nuntiorum. Diaconus tum presbyter ordinatus, Paulus dignitatum corniculari primatus ecclesiarum Anglicanensium Canadae 2004, ulterius presbyterque cantor apud Sant Chiedae et praefectus patriae societates Anglicanensis orationis. Floret Thalamon Genovevae conjugis cum liberis Hadriano et Sophia senioribus Coangeno e Priano, aberrandibus nurisque Caroluta Cortena nepoterissi. Hunc ego scium virum tam moribus quam doctrina esse idiono, qui admitator ad numerum sociorum prae honorabilim collegiuius honoris causa.
Ego doctorate mihi commissit admetto in gradum doctoras divinitate in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
So I would like to invite the Most Reverend Colin Johnson, this time playing himself, to present Jean Gibault for the degree of Doctor of Divinity. Sorry if I stole your joke.
sometimes nice to be myself. Chancellor Graham, Provost Moran, Vice Dean Smythe, honorary graduands, graduating class, and assembled guests. 40 years ago, a newly ordained curate met and formed a friendship with a senior high school student who already showed promise as a gifted scholar, an able jazz musician, a pious Anglican. John Gibo was the student and I was the curate. The friendship endured through the years, although the distances, both geographical and temporal, increased. Chancellor, it is my great honor tonight to present the merits of the Reverend Canon Dr. John Gibo to you in this august convocation. Although I know that we Anglicans are supposed to uphold the primacy of grace over merits. Let me just say, though, that John possesses both grace and merits. John trained in history at the University of Toronto, and then sensing a call to priesthood that was generally discerned long before it became apparent to John himself, he enrolled in the Master of Divinity program at Trinity College. He went on to earn a doctorate in theology from Trinity and the University of Toronto. He served as a priest in the Quebec North Shore at St. James Cathedral, Toronto, as canon theologian in Ottawa, and as assistant priest of Église Saint-Germain in Geneva. 2 years ago, Canon Gibo was appointed to succeed the Reverend Canon Alison Barnett Cowan as Director for Unity, Faith, and Order. I can always remember UFO of the Anglican Communion. A hugely complicated and highly nuanced role that, amongst other things, acts to bridge the numerous ecumenical and interfaith dialogues between the Anglican Communion and other churches, and within the provinces themselves, that is probably even more complicated, that comprise the Anglican Communion. Peacemaker, theological reconciler, encourager, interpreter, administrator, editor, educator, ambassador. Pick your title for John, for they all fit. He had come prepared for the role. In 2008, Canon Gibo was appointed as the director of the World Council of Churches Commission on Faith and Order based in Geneva, Switzerland. Faith and Order is the theological commission that resolves issues of Christian disunity and promotes a vision of the church as a communion of unity in diversity. Note those words. That is John's theme. John follows in a great Trinity tradition. I remember Father Eugene Fairweather coming into class, pushing his spectacles up his nose, the bridge of his nose, and waving a booklet and said, "We've got another one." And it was a brand new Archic document that was helping to redefine relationships between Anglicans and Roman Catholics. And those documents formed my generation's understanding of ecclesiology and sacramental theology. The World Council of Churches summarized one of its greatest recent achievements, produced in 2013, in these words, quote, "What can we say together about the Church of the Triune God in order to grow in communion, to struggle together for justice and peace in the world, and to overcome together our past and present divisions?" The document, The Church Towards a Common Vision, is a remarkable answer to this question, produced by theologians from the widest range of Christian traditions and cultures. The Church Towards a Common Vision addresses first the Church's mission, unity, and its being in the Trinitarian life of God. It then addresses our growth in communion, in apostolic faith, sacramental life, and ministry, as churches called to live in and for the world. No surprise that John Gibo was the principal editor of that groundbreaking consensus document. And both John and I had the good sense to marry outside of our Anglican tradition. Me to a Quaker, John to a Mennonite. Before Geneva, John was a professor at the Faculty of Theology, St. Paul University, Ottawa, where he served as Director of Anglican Studies within the bilingual Catholic Pontifical University. There, he taught in the areas of ecumenism, liturgy, church history, historical theology, homiletics, and Anglican studies. He has served on numerous Canadian and international dialogues and commissions that are influencing the current contours of the Christian ecumenism, including the Anglican Roman Catholic Dialogue of Canada, the Faith and Witness Commission of the Canadian Council of Churches, the Inter-Anglican Standing Commission on Ecumenical Relations, the Inter-Anglican Standing Commission on Unity, Faith, and Order, and the International Commission for Anglican Orthodox Theological Dialogue. That latter group produced the 2006 Cyprus Agreement statement, The Church of the Triune God. You would not be surprised to know that John is currently the co-secretary to the International Anglican Roman Catholic Commission for Unity and Mission, IARCM. When he began his current ministry in the Anglican Communion Office, John said, "I look forward to accompanying the Anglican Communion as together we rediscover and proclaim a compelling vision of communion as the gift by which the Church lives, and at the same time, the gift that God calls the Church to offer to a wounded and divided humanity." An article in the Anglican Journal at the time noted that Jibo's nuanced understanding of communion will certainly be important for the global Anglican Church, which continues to struggle with the questions of how Christians who disagree on certain theological issues should relate to each other. As our Primate Archbishop Fred Hiltz commented, Jibo is prepared for the challenges of the position. He is coming in with eyes wide open, and he is bringing a brilliant mind and a huge heart for communion. And I think we are going to be incredibly well served. Indeed we are. Chancellor, on behalf of the Corporation of Trinity College, it is my great honor to present to you a theologian, teacher, ecumenist, priest, distinguished alumnus of this university, and ask you to confer on John Jibo the degree of Doctor of Divinity honoris causa.
By honorabilis cancellaria totaque universitas, praesento vobis Johannem Sanctus Heliae Giba. Inter licentias magistri divinitatis tum doctoris theologiae apud Collegium Trinitatis 1984 ministravit Johannes Diocesi Canadae Inferioris. Docens facultati Sancti Pauli Universitas Ottavae in studiis liturgiae, antiquitatum ecclesiae, Anglicanensiumque oecumenitas donec 2008, semperque socius Dialogi Catholici Anglicanensis Canadensis Commissionis Globales Dialogo Theologico Anglicanensis Orthodoxensis Commissionis Spei et Ordinis Ecclesiae Anglicanensis Canadae Consultatori Liturgicus Inter Anglicanensis et Inter Anglicanensis Consistori de Vinculis Oecumenicis. Praefectus Commissionis Spei et Ordinis Electis 2008, Concilio Ecclesiarum totis orbis apud Comitatum Geneventium Helvetiae operatus, et 2015 migravit ad Londinium Britanniae officio Herdienae, Praefectus Unitatis Spei et Ordinis, Communionis Anglicanorum. Hunc ego scio viram tam moribus quam doctrina esse vidionem, qui admitato ad numerum sociorum prae honorabilim collegi huius honoris causa.
Admitto te in regnum doctorus divinitatem, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
Chancellor Graham, Provost Moran, Dean Smythe, honorary graduands, graduating class, and assembled guests. To mark this 175th anniversary of the Faculty of Divinity, I would like to highlight its distinctive contribution to the ecumenical movement, the recovery of Christian unity rooted in the prayer of Jesus for his disciples, that they may all be one, so that the world may believe. There is a Trinity College connection that goes all the way back to the origins of this movement, to one of its primary architects, Bishop Charles Henry Brent. Born in 1862 in Newcastle, Ontario, Brent graduated from Trinity College in 1884, albeit from the Faculty of Arts, not Divinity. Somehow he got himself ordained a deacon 2 years later in St. James Cathedral. A year later, he was ordained a priest in the Diocese of Western New York and spent the rest of his life serving the Episcopal Church. When in 1901 he was elected as the first missionary bishop to the Philippines, he was awarded a Doctor of Divinity from this college and thus technically became a graduate of its Faculty of Divinity. Brent's ecumenical vision was shaped by his experience as a missionary, with the crisis for evangelism created by competing and divided churches. His vision was shaped by his experience of the catastrophe of the First World War and how divided Christianity contributed to that conflict and how divided Christians failed to be credible witnesses to peace. It's always hard to be ambassadors of Christ and ministers of reconciliation when Christians are not reconciled to each other. Well, with this sense of urgency, Brent relentlessly pursued Christian leaders and their theologians to resolve the issues of the faith and the ordering of the churches that kept them apart. The result was the First World Conference on Faith and Order that met in August 1927 in Lausanne, Switzerland. There, 400 Christian leaders and their theologians, representing the divided Christian churches, encountered one another for the very first time. To their great surprise, they discovered that they were much closer to one another than anyone could ever have imagined. There, the agenda of theological ecumenism was set, with the trust that it would be achieved. Brent died in Lausanne on the 27th of March in 1929, and is remembered on that day in both the Anglican Church of Canada and the Episcopal Church. I think to this date, the only graduate of Trinity College to be on the calendar of saints. But as I discovered the other day, more importantly, there's a portrait of him hanging in the Divinity Common Room of this college, although somewhat less conspicuous than some other portraits. From Brent onwards, the ecumenical project has been expressed in common mission, common struggle for justice, peace, and the integrity of creation, and theological ecumenism. When divided churches enter into relationships with each other, they begin by establishing formal, official dialogues to propose steps to restore unity and to offer a vision of a church fully united. For without such a vision, the quest for Christian unity perishes. The impact of theological ecumenism is best measured in decades rather than years, and so it's easy to overlook and undervalue. Its first fruits have consistently been friendships that cross old divides, and enough trust between divided churches that they can commit to engage together in things like councils of churches, common mission, common work in relief, development, and advocacy, common interfaith dialogue. Just some recent examples. Last month, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Ecumenical Patriarch committed themselves and their churches to work together to end human trafficking. Pope Francis and Archbishop Justin will visit South Sudan later this year to support the peace process. And a little closer to home, the 4 leaders of the Anglican and Lutheran churches in North America, in full communion with each other, sent a common letter at the beginning of Lent with this title, Remember the Refugees and Migrants. These and so many other common ventures towards justice and peace are the outcomes of trust formed in the theological dialogues. Now, ecumenism today, to some, seems like a movement in trouble. I think, however, that the biggest challenge to ecumenism today has been its success. The new relationships forged between churches by their bilateral dialogues have been so successful and so successfully received into the very life of the churches that most of us can't remember what a divided church was like. Increasingly, people are born into a context where there weren't such divisions as there were before. So that most of us simply can't remember what that time was like, and so we are no longer scandalized by disunity the way we were a century ago, and indeed 50 years ago. So, Archbishop, when you speak to Philip Poole, tell him that we don't say words like papist in public anymore. Because Christian disunity does not hurt us the way it used to, we've become complacent about the divisions that remain if we take the time to notice them at all. And so it's precisely when we look back at 50, 100, or 175 years that patterns, shifts, and impacts become clear, including the ecumenical impact of this faculty of divinity. Archbishop Colin has said quite a bit about my work in London, but simply to say it's to support, guide, promote, interpret the ecumenical relationships of the Anglican Communion. Now, in the past 30 years, 5 of us have filled this portfolio. 4 of us have been Canadian. What very few people realize is that all 4 of us are graduates of this faculty of divinity. Donald Anderson, David Hamid, Alison Barnett-Cowan, and me. And we work with theologians from around the world on our various commissions, including a number of Canadian Anglicans. Now, they don't all come from Trinity College. I think of the extraordinary work that Bishop Linda Nichols, a graduate from Wycliffe College, is doing in our dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church. But the vast majority of Canadian Anglicans serving on these dialogues are alumni of this faculty. A little bit of a shopping list. On the Anglican Orthodox dialogue, there have been Eugene Fairweather, Henry Hill, Natasha Klukach, Philip Hobson, and me. On the Anglican Roman Catholic dialogue, there was Eugene Fairweather. On the Anglican Roman Catholic Commission on Unity and Mission, there has been David Hamid, Dennis Drainville, and Victor Atabafo from Ghana, who studied here in the 80s. On the Anglican Oriental Orthodox dialogue, there's been Harold Nahabidian and Henry Hill. On the Anglican Lutheran dialogue, there's been Alison Barnett-Cowan and Maylan Mabey. On the Anglican Old Catholic Commission, David Hamid. On the Anglican Baptist dialogue, Alison again. The former Anglican Ecumenical Commission, there was Alison, Bill Crockett, and me. And on the current Inter-Anglican Standing Commission on Unity, Faith and Order, Victoria Matthews and Victor Atabafo. Both Alison and I were members at one point. Now, the 4 of us who are in the same position I'm in now, we have all been secretaries or co-secretaries to all of the international dialogues and commissions of the Anglican Communion.
As you've heard, there is yet another level of global theological dialogue, and that's the Multilateral Commission on Faith and Order of the World Council of Churches, which began in 1927 under the leadership of Charles Brent, and continues to this day as the widest platform for theological dialogue in the world. The Canadian Anglicans on this commission have all been graduates of Trinity College. Eugene Fairweather was appointed in 1952. He was succeeded by Helen Milton. Now she's interesting. She's remembered as one of the first two women to ever receive degrees in theology from this place in 1954. She was succeeded by Allison, and she was succeeded by Natasha Klukach. Other Trinity alumni such as Donald Anderson, Wendy Fletcher, and Anne Privet were involved in particular meetings. And I was the director of Faith and Order from 2008 to 2015. That 17 alumni of the Faculty of Divinity of Trinity College have served in the past 65 years continuously in 40 different capacities on the international ecumenical dialogues is truly remarkable. Together, we have made a difference to a movement that has renewed global Christianity. Would any of us have found ourselves serving on these dialogues had we not studied at Trinity College? I can ask some of my predecessors, but for me the answer is clearly not. My ecumenical formation was entirely shaped by this faculty, even before I arrived at Trinity in 1981. My first ecumenical mentors were two curates in the parish where I grew up, and both Trinity graduates, James Merritt and Colin Johnson. Henry Hill, a much earlier alumnus, introduced me to the world of Eastern Christianity. Henry would have been so delighted by the creation of an Orthodox School of Theology in this college. And then there was the experience of studying here. There's the context of Toronto and the University of Toronto with such a rich ecumenical, interfaith, and cultural diversity all around us. Then there was the context of the Toronto School of Theology, which was new and exotic for me, and yet became normal and habitual. And there was Professor Eugene Fairweather, the leading Canadian Anglican ecumenist of the 20th century. In addition to serving on the Faith and Order Commission, Eugene was an official representative of the Anglican Communion to the Second Vatican Council. He was a founding member of our dialogues with the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. And he brought all of this experience to his students. It was an extraordinary time. Now, all of the people that I have named, as well as so many more alumni who have served on national or more local ecumenical dialogues, we were all Father Fairweather students. I think the one of us who received his Elijah's mantle was Allison. Not just in terms of her ecumenical breadth and experience, but in her capacity to mentor others, particularly younger people and women. But all of us who have studied in the Faculty of Divinity at Trinity College are the inheritors of this living tradition. And so I wonder, who among the teaching staff and among you, the graduating class, will be the next ones to take up this mantle? Final thoughts to the graduating class. As your time at Trinity College draws to a close and you move to new ventures, I leave you with words by Charles Henry Brent at the end of that very first Faith and Order Conference in 1927, in the hopes that something of his experience at that conference will resonate with your experience here at Trinity College as you leave. God's Spirit has been in the midst of us. It was God who called us hither. God's presence has been made manifest in our worship, our deliberations, our whole fellowship. God has discovered us to one another. We have dared, and God has justified our daring. We can never be the same again. Thank you very much.